All right, so welcome to this second unit then of this module on prompt engineering and society. So today we're going to talk about prompt engineering in more detail. So why do we need prompt engineering? Well, prompt engineering is important because these AI models don't actually think like us humans in the same way. You have to understand that these models sort of generate their answers based on patterns in the data that they have been trained on. So this means that the quality and the structure of the prompts sort of very much affects how the answers turn out, and your choice of words matter, and the way that you formulate and the way that you write sort of changes a lot in the response you get. But these AI models tend to base their answers on these patterns that they have learned and been trained on. So a well-designed prompt can therefore be very good for improving the accuracy and relevance of the answers, and also reduce the risk of incorrect or undesired biased answers, or getting the wrong answers, or answering the wrong questions and stuff like that. And also, as I talked about in the previous lecture, improve performance by minimizing these unnecessary retries that just use up a lot of energy and unnecessary, sort of limiting your targeting your answers to what you actually want to get the answer for. So I would say that good prompt engineering is an important skill for the future. By making it possible to produce accurate, relevant, and useful answers is probably a very good engineering skill in the future to have. Previously, we talked about how good you are at Googling things. Nowadays, we talk more about how good you are at using these AI tools and your prompt engineering skills. So this really can improve how you can be productive in the future. So this is an illustrative example of choosing the right keywords. So with that, I mean like how you should somehow think about when you choose the keywords that you want to ask for in these tools. Like, what do the prompt and keywords actually mean? Not what you think they mean, but what they actually mean for the AI model, and in what context they come from. So this is a simple example with a cat. So here I've used the prompt photorealistic orange cat, and as you see, it generates a quite good image of an orange cat, but it has this AI haze over it. You sort of clearly see that this is an AI generated image and stuff like that. So then you can start to think like, what does this word photorealistic mean? This word photorealistic, okay, yes, it sort of means photorealistic, but where has it been used? And the term photorealistic has often been used for like digital images that tries to look like a photo. You don't tag a real photo with the word photorealistic. So it's actually better if you want to get like an actual photograph of an orange cat to actually write photograph orange cat, because then, you know, photographs of orange cats have usually been tagged with those keywords in some sense and trained. So even though you're after an image that looks photorealistic, if you use that word has mostly been used on 3D models and sort of digital images of cats, and not actual photographs of cats. And you can take this even further, like what other keywords can good photos have been tagged with that these models have been trained on? And one example of that is maybe like these technical words that come from the cameras, like 4K, 50mm lens, 1.8f, Nikon, Canon, and so forth. And then you can get an even more, let's say, photograph looking image of an orange cat if you use the right keywords, which these sort of similar photos could have been tagged with and trained on. So using the right keywords is important to get what you actually are after in your prompting. There's some techniques when it comes to prompt engineering, although this field moves very quickly, but I can still mention some of these so that you have heard about them. So the first sort of prompting engineering technique is called zero-shot prompting. And that's the simplest method, and the one you have probably been using a lot when you have tried these different tools. It's sort of you give them a prompt without any previous data, without any input. So you sort of just ask a question and hope that it answers correctly. Like, what are the main applications of digital twins in industrial Internet of Things, or something like that. And then you will get an answer which hopefully is correct. But as we don't really give the models any context or any understanding, it uses its built-in understanding, its built-in bias and default settings. It usually answers in that way if you do this type of zero-shot prompting. Other techniques are called one-shot or few-shot prompting, and those deal with more about giving examples on what you are sort of asking for, to guide the model into answering what you want it to answer. So the one-shot example is like you begin by giving the model an example on what you're looking for, and then you sort of ask it to further explain this concept, for example, and then you will probably get a more detailed answer on what you're actually looking for. Another example is the few-shot example, where you actually give them multiple examples to even more sort of guide it in what it is that you're looking for. The limitation of this one-shot and few-shot prompting is sort of that it can tip over to that side instead, that it tends to answer the questions as you are asking them. That tries to answer the question that you, in a way that you want it to answer it. So it can become very biased towards your example and doesn't really think for itself anymore, or go outside the box of the examples. Tend to happen if you do this type of prompting. One thing that has happened a lot now in the recent year here is these thinking models. And previously we talked about chain of thought prompting, which had to deal with this thinking and logical reasoning. And basically, you then think of the prompting as like explaining the step-by-step process, and by making the model think in a step-by-step process and answering questions in a step-by-step process, they can also answer more logically to different, more complex questions. So you sort of give them an example on the different details, and then sort of you ask it even to think step by step before answering and stuff like that. You can do this type of forcing it to do chain of thought. There's also something that's called generated knowledge prompting, where you sort of ask it to generate knowledge first. You work very much with the knowledge first, and then you sort of ask it the question, so that it has this in its sort of, let's call it short-term memory of what it has been generated, to then answer your question based on the knowledge that it has first generated. Another prompting technique is called self-consistency prompting, where you sort of ask the same question several times in different sort of angles, and then you can sort of choose the most common answer to mitigate it being so that you really get the answer that is most sort of reliable. And this might be important when you do stuff that actually has a very high reliability, like making diagnosis or medical things and stuff like that. Then you really want the real answer. So then you probably want to run your prompts many times to combat that. Of course, thinking models today, many of these have now been built into these models. That ChatGPT has their thinking models. DeepSeek is also an example of one of these thinking models. And here you can even see it. If you ask a question, you will see like it says in how it's thinking. And in DeepSeek, you can even have a look at the way that it's thinking first, and then you can see how it answers the question. So again, many of these things, prompt engineering techniques, are being built in automatically in these tools now with this chain of thought prompting and stuff like that. But some other prompt engineering prompting tips for you before you sort of use these tools is that you should sort of be as clear as you can. You shouldn't be afraid of writing long and complex instruction, but they should be clear, like to the point. But don't be afraid to write long instructions. Try to have a natural human conversation with them. Correct them if they make a mistake. Tell them what is wrong so that they can correct it afterwards. And it's also good to give them access to the materials that you have. And it's actually also better to not spend a lot of time trying to clean data. If you have a transcript of a meeting that is very sort of unorganized and stuff like that, usually better to send in that and then have the AI work with the unclean materials that help you sort of dig that out. Other things that can be good to think about is about setting the scenario, setting the context, specifying the task very clearly. What's the format you want the answer in? what tone of voice do you want it in? Do you want it to be very academic or made for 5-year-olds and stuff like that? Reinforce the good, the bad things, and give feedback to it. So very much working with the tools in an interactive process. Another sort of thing that you can try out and work with when it comes to prompt engineering is sort of what we call a thinking dialogue, that you really do this generative knowledge prompting, that you sort of plan out first, what is it that I need to create? And then you make it think about the different processes and the different steps, what knowledge it needs to be able to do these steps, and talk through the steps. And then you start sort of generating the text for an introduction chapter, for a related works chapter, or whatever report it is that you're writing or something like that. And you can also ask it to ask you questions, like what more information do you need to be able to create this thing that I want you to do? And then it can answer that as well. So be aware of that. Another interesting exercise that is fun to try is to create sort of this expert panel. You can actually like role play with these AI LLM tools, so that you can talk to them and have them talk to each other as well. Like create your own expert panel with a law person, marketing, economy, IT, and HR, and then you pitch them an idea, and then you have them discuss to each other their different perspectives. So you can have one very optimistic person and one very pessimistic person, and so forth. So you can really dig into these type of problems, or have the models dig into them by doing this type of role playing, which is actually quite an interesting way of prompting as well. So some study assignment that you can try out when it comes to this prompt engineering. So my suggestion is to try to use these generative text models. And if you used them 2 years ago and wasn't impressed, try them again now and see how much better they have become. It's really a good thing to try it out, because a lot has happened. A lot has happened just this summer with these tools, I would say. Things that didn't work before the summer now work. So try to use this text tool to make your own work easier. Maybe you have something that you're working on a certain area or topic. Try to see what type of help you can get from them. And you can also use these different methods of asking questions. You can try to ask pure factual question, explain the area to me. You can ask it to ask you questions, like I'm going to give a presentation on this domain. What do you need from me? Need to know from me to be able to help me? This is a way for you to be in sort of like the driver's seat, and the AI helping you more than the AI explaining things to you. And finally, try to do this role-playing exercise where you try to set up this expert panel of AI personas to help you. I want you to do certain things. So they say to it, like, I want you to act like a very pessimistic person, and then we discuss this, and then you can actually have a discussion regarding it. All right, so that's the end of this second unit. So in the third and final unit after this, we will be talking more about reflections and society, and what kind of effects these type of tools might have for the future. Right, thanks.